Good afternoon, everyone. We will just give the attendees another minute to join. Thank you for being here with us. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me loud and clear. Welcome to this 10th webinar in the Paving the Way for a Clean Energy Transition with Decentralized Renewable Energy, or PWCET series. This is the last webinar in the series. So thank you for joining, and especially also to those that have joined us throughout the series. Quickly, I will take you through the agenda for today. So we'll start with a keynote speech from Mrs. Bärbel Höhn, Special Representative for Energy in Africa from BMZ, followed by a presentation of the PWCET series report by colleague Mr. Deepak Mohapatra. Then we will have interventions from 4 speakers from the ARE membership, followed by a moderated discussion and audience Q&A, as well as closing remarks from Mrs. Dorothea Otremba from GIZ. Just quickly, for those that do not know ARE yet, so ARE is the Global Business Association for Distributed and Decentralized Renewable Energy, DRE. We catalyze private sector-driven markets for sustainable electricity services, and with that create jobs and power equitable green economies. ARE currently unites about 200 members worldwide, spanning across 55 countries and 3 continents. Members are primarily active in sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. You can see the details and find all the members on the ARE matchmaking platform. If we go to the next slide, this shows the distribution of the members. As I said, primarily active in sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, and then Latin America. And ARE is a technology neutral association. So we cover all renewables, including bioenergy, hydro, wind, PV, and related components and storage solutions. Coming to the next slide, ARE, should there be companies here in the audience today that are interested in hearing more about our services, we'd of course happy to take you through them more in detail. But as headlines, ARE offers support to its members in terms of business and market development, capacity building, support through investment, technical training, policy advocacy support, and communication and marketing services. As mentioned, the webinar today is the last one, the 10th and final webinar in the PWCET series, which is commissioned to promote public discourse on the subject of the clean energy transition, specifically with distributed and decentralized renewable energies. The final session today will primarily focus on checking the status quo, insights from DRE stakeholders, and be a sort of summary of the whole series. So we will hear interventions from a whole range of companies and from PWCET itself, as you heard before. Just before we go into the webinar itself, of course, I would like to first of all thank the audience for joining us today, and for those that have joined multiple or all the last 9 sessions. It's been a nice and enlightening journey so far. And also, of course, a big thank you to our colleagues in the GBE program, the Green People's Energy program, that we have been organizing this series with, in particular to Mrs. Hearn and Mrs. Utremba. In terms of house rules, before you ask in the questions, the PowerPoint slides and recording will be shared after the webinar. And in case you're not aware yet, you can ask questions in the chat via the chat box, which should be on your right-hand side. At least that is the case on my screen. So with that, I think that will be it for my opening remarks today. Thank you for joining again. Wish you a nice webinar, and with that I hand over to my colleague Mr. Deepak Mohapatra, a Senior Officer of Business and Market Development at ARE. Over to you, Deepak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jens, for your kind opening remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to you from whichever place you are dialing in today. My name is Deepak Mohapatra, Senior Officer of Business and Market Development at ARE, and I have the pleasure to be your moderator, to be your host for this last edition of the PWCET series. Yeah, what can I say? It has been quite a long journey of 2 years together with my colleagues from GBE, and Mrs. Hearn is on the screen, Mrs. Utremba, who was actively engaging with me in the background in preparation and implementation of this series. From my side, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank you for sticking with us throughout these 2 years, being the loyal audience of PWCET series. I will present some nice data later on. You will see how remarkable achievement that we have been able to achieve so far. Yeah, so just wanted to reiterate once again that this is the last edition. Speakers will be lined up in the way forward after the opening room, after the keynote speech and the presentation of the final report. Please do consider asking your question using the question and answer option on GoToWebinar, and we will be taking them during the Q&A. One thing not to forget, please mention the speaker that you're asking your question to, so that we can redirect your question to the right speaker instead of having it open in the air. Next slide, please. And with this, I have the pleasure to welcome Mrs. Hearn, maybe for the very last time in this series. I'm pretty sure we will be working further in other activities, but for this series, you're most welcome to deliver the keynote speech. You have 10 minutes and the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak, and all the others. And maybe first I will welcome all of you to join this webinar. And as Jens Jäger and Deepak told you, that's the 10th, but always the final webinar. We started it in the program Green People's Energy. And I would like first to thank, for example, Mrs. Utremba from the GIZ. She designed it and launched the webinar series, and also many thanks to the ARE team, especially Deepak. He was our contact person who organized the webinar. We gave the money from the ministry, but we need the people who implemented our ideas. Yes, when we started 6 years ago with the program Green People's Energy, we saw the situation in Africa, and that means that half of the population in Africa have no access to electricity, and 90% of them are living in rural areas. And that's why we decided to strengthen the situation in rural areas, and because we would like to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and that means leave no one behind, and that means everybody has to have access to electricity. But in the last 3.5 years, there changed a lot on our planet, because the crisis became faster and faster. And we have, on the one side, we can really see very clear the effects of climate change, especially in Africa. So we see millions of people who are suffering in the north of Africa, for example, of the drought or even the floods. And in this moment, we see the floods in the north of Africa and Libya, but also cyclones, and so many people lost their homes, lost their lives, and we can really see it's a devastating situation in Africa. And but besides the climate crisis, we have two other crises to overcome. The first one was COVID-19, about 2 years, and now the Russian war in Ukraine, about 1.5 years. And we noticed that we have the problem of supply chains that collapsed, and we have increasing energy and food prices extremely. And more countries decided to be more independent on imports of fossil fuels, because to make them more independent for themselves and use their own sun and wind. And on the other side, we see that the price, for example, of photovoltaic was decreasing, falling sharply in relation to other energy sources in recent years. So it's really a good situation for installing photovoltaic. And we can see it, for example, at the studies of ARENA. So in the last year, 2022, 295 gigawatt electricity of renewables was added last year. And from these installations, from the whole installations for energy or for electricity in the whole world, 83% of this capacity is now renewables, 83%, and that's really great. And it's you can see that renewables are really the best option you can look for. I remember 10 years ago that was about a bit more than 40%, and now it's more than 80% that is coming from renewables with new electricity capacity. So that means that we can start now really with installing renewables. And my function as special representative of energy for the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development in Africa was really to do a bit more to implement the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, because we know if we have no electricity, we will not overcome hunger and poverty. And one of the main points when we start with renewables is the political will. That's not only in industrial countries, but in all countries all over the world. And in many of these countries, we have obstacles and we have barriers, so we are not strong enough. Maybe the first we have to talk about the advantages of renewable energies. And one of the advantages is now that renewables are cheaper than oil or coal or gas. And the second one means more independence from import of fossil fuels and use their own sun and wind, because they are free. They are for free. And third, renewable energies create a lot more jobs. So we can bring added values to the villages, more income, more jobs, help the people, for example, and social institutions like hospitals and schools. And it's a very good benefit, for example, for the health for the people in rural areas. But nevertheless, although we have such a lot of advantages, we have not really a breakthrough. As I told you, 295 gigawatt was installed last year with renewables, but in Africa, only 2.7 gigawatt. And that's not so much. That's only 1% of the capacity installed in the whole world. And I joined in the last week, I joined the African Climate Summit in Nairobi. And the goal of the head of states was that they would like to reach in Africa 300 gigawatt renewables in the year 2030. And that is very ambitious. So we have to look why is it not that much installed capacities of renewables like in other regions of the world, and what can we do to overcome the obstacles? And as I said, the most important point is a political will, because the politicians must make the framework, the laws, found institutions, look for funds and grants, and give the investors the ability to make their own decisions within this framework. My experience after this 6 years, and I visited 15 different countries in Africa, is that first we have to train the people because we need experts, we need craftsmen, we need people who have the knowledge to install photovoltaic or wind turbines, and who are really technical experts, and set up the implementation, set up the photovoltaic plants and maintain the system in a good way. And on the other side, we have, for example, in customer centers, we have a lot of jobs we created, but we need the people who can do all these jobs. And not only in Germany, in a lot of other African countries, that is really a bottleneck. So we need young people, we need educated young people. And most of the young people would like to go to the university to make an academic degree. But I think our experience is that we need more vocational training, more practical training. And so I think we have to look for that. And that was one part of the Green People's Energy to support the training. And the second is very important, that we need a broad participation of small and medium-sized companies, because we would like to strengthen the local market. Not that foreign companies are coming inside and invest money and have the benefit of it. It is very important to strengthen the local market in those countries, because those small companies, they can start with a small business to cool or dry agricultural products, make dairy products, or produce juice and tea for their own countries. What we are looking for is so productive use, have more income and added values. And then it's important, especially for decentralized energies, that we have a good maintenance. So a person who feels responsible, or an institution or company who feels responsible for this photovoltaic plant. So that means a sustainable operating system. Otherwise, if only a small component is broken, the whole system doesn't work any longer. And that's why we sought to look for a financial tool where part of it is really institution or person that is responsible for this photovoltaic plant. And that's why we were looking for financial instruments, something that have a component of grants, a component of private capital, that means loans, and a component of maybe small and medium-sized companies that are looking for the maintenance and have an income of the electricity price of the people are living in these villages. We call that's part of our Green People's Energy. We call it result-based financing. And it works very well in some countries, but not in all countries. And because in some countries, the framework is not good enough for the sort of financing systems. So there are some questions like, who is operating this mini grids, for example, in rural areas? Is this only the national energy company, or can the local government or the energy cooperative or the local private company can operate the photovoltaic system? And how can we overcome a lot of bureaucracy? And in some of the countries, the tariff system is a blockade. So how can we activate private capital? Because if the private investors have no guarantee that they get the money back, they will not invest in offshore solutions in rural areas. And for example, when the national grid is coming and they have something like a guarantee for the invested money. So there are a lot of circumstances we have to look at to be successful. But the most important one is to make an exchange of ideas and can look what is going in the right direction, in which countries we have really, they are front runners. So we have a lot of installed photovoltaic plants, and in which are some obstacles and we have to overcome them. And that's why we have this webinar. We make an exchange of ideas. We can hear of good ideas and of African countries, and that's why I would like to say good luck for all of you and success for implementing renewables, because it's, to me, it's the main point to overcome hunger and poverty, and that's our goal. Thank you so much, and good luck at this last webinar.
Am I audible now? Is it working? Okay. Sorry about this little glitch, ladies and gentlemen. It happens in the online world often. So I have now the pleasure of presenting the final statistics of the PWCET report. If we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, here, this is the overview of all 10 webinars that we have covered so far. As you can see, starting with the need for decentralized renewable energies, for SDG 7 goal, to reach the SDG 7 goal, which we managed to do at the highest level of EU-Africa Business Forum as the pilot webinar. Followed by that, we have different topics that we touched upon, for example, stimulating demand for productive use of renewable energies. Then we touched upon regulatory and policy-related topics. Followed by that, we also touched upon capacity building and training opportunities for the youth, for the women, and so on, to develop capacity at a local level. Followed by that, we also wrote a joint publication together with the GBE program, which was on the subject of understanding the clean energy transition from a community perspective, like how the community can come together to take the responsibility of their own energy infrastructure and take active part in it. Followed by that, we also touched upon many innovative subjects like carbon financing and employment and entrepreneurship in terms of a gender perspective, to see how the local inclusion and community inclusion can happen at a more drastic level, at a more increased level. Followed by that, the need of the hour topic, which is the financing for the clean energy transition, where the money comes from, how the money comes, and who is going to do that. And that subject has been also tackled upon. Followed by that, we also took a very innovative topic on sustainable cooling systems that we did as part of the second last webinar. And today here we are with the wrap-up show of ensuring this clean energy transition in Africa with the help of decentralized renewable energy, and to see the impact of SDG 7. Next slide, please. And here I have the pleasure to give you an overview of what has happened so far. As you can see, these were the dates of the webinars and the topics. And as my colleague Jens mentioned, that we will share this link, a link of this website, of this presentation and the recording. You will have access to all the links of the webinars, the recordings, the presentations in one consolidated manner, so that you can refer to it whenever you want to. Now, a couple of figures in terms of registrations, and one slide back here. And here you can see the amount of registrations that we were receiving were quite motivating for us to keep up with this series, to keep on going with innovative subjects, to bring the experts from the industry, talking about these subjects and sharing their insights and knowledge so that you can take good best practices from it and then implement in your own organizations and in your own projects. In terms of attendees, if I put together the number of attendees, I have a lot of pride to tell you today that over these 2 years of timeline, we have gathered more than 2,250 participants who were actively attending our PWCET series, and this is a number which sets a record by itself. I don't know any other webinar series, at least in my career of 5 years, achieving this kind of statistics so far. Next slide, we will talk about the kind of participation that we have from all over the world. We have managed to gather individuals and representatives from the public sector, from the government entities, from the private sector companies. The majority of you are also belonging to that category. Associations, be it international, national, or regional, different financiers, be it debt, equity, grant, and different kind of financing, technical assistance and support as well. Followed by that, then NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, having hailed from different parts of the world in different countries. Academia, one of the strongest pillars of the DRE sector, as when it comes to research and development, and as well as project implementations. Consultancies as well, when in terms of the policy-related projects and so on and so forth. And then any other type of participation, be it a student, be it a normal individual consultant, or be it some renewable energy enthusiast who were just interested in our topics. So all in all, this has been a wonderful, diversified categories of participants that we have managed to gather over the period of 2 years, which is also a matter of another feather on the hat of the PWCET series. Next one. I think this is the most important slide. Why I say that? Because the participation of those 2,250 participants, they were all coming from all parts of the world. As you can see this morning when I was putting together this world map, I was just smiling in the background saying that we have managed to reach pretty much every corner of the planet with our PWCET series, and this shows the importance and the necessity of such a series, of such a dialogue and such a public discourse, with the objective of which we started this whole series, that we wanted to create this public discourse on the topic of clean energy transition, to share the knowledge that we have gathered so far, and to look forward to a brighter future with where we will have reached the SDG 7 goals in a matter of couple of years' time. So the more comprehensive report will be shared in our website after this webinar, after we have collected the data from this webinar. And then please stay tuned to our website on ARE, as well as to the website of GBE, where you will find all this information. With this, I would officially close this final statistics presentation from the PWCET series and open the floor for the speaker interventions. Dear speakers, please take a look at this little symbol, this signage, which says, please wrap up. You will have 10 minutes for your presentation, and please stick to the time. And the floor is all yours. Miss Lucia Kamati, Senior Project Manager from Africa Green Tech, one of our valued members. We invite you for your presentation. Over to you, Lucia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Deepak. Pleasure to be here
Lucia,
today.
sorry, we are not able to hear you. If you can unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, all good, all good.
Oh, okay.
Please go on.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and speak on this topic, because decentralized renewable energy is a topic that is really close to my heart, especially when it's focused on my continent. So as Deepak said, so my name is Lucia Kamati, and I am the Senior Project Manager here at Africa Green Tech in Germany. So for those who are not familiar with our work, we have been in the mini-grid scene now for more than 7 years, where we started off in West Africa, and then we scaled to East Africa, and currently we are also developing some projects in Southern Africa. And yeah, just before I also start with my presentation, I just want to also thank the team of Alliance for Rural Electrification and of course PWCET for organizing all this webinar series and bringing such a diverse group of panelists. Sorry, can you hear me? I just received a message that you can't hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So my presentation today is focused on electricity in a container because that is our solution, but I'll get into it. But really to reach the hardest to reach areas in sub-Saharan Africa that Mrs. Horn was also talking about, the 90% of people that are living in sub-Saharan Africa. Next slide, please. Yeah, so some of these points they were already highlighted in the, in the keynote speech. But before I get into my presentation, I think it's really important to start off with highlighting with some of the data from the this year tracking SDG 7, the Energy Progress Report that was just, I think a couple of months ago was released. And with only 7 years to achieving the SDG 2030, the report shows that there is a progress, of course, in increase of renewable energy in the energy consumption, as we can see compared from 2010. And also looking at access to electricity, it decreased from 1.1 billion that in 2010 people, in 2010, 1.1 people didn't have access to electricity, but as of last year, this number decreased to 675 million. And also with clean cooking, the number, of course, decreased from 2.9 billion to 2.3 billion. And so really looking at this, we see that there is a progress, and the progress has been quite slow, and the number looks like there is a decrease that is going on, but this progress have actually happened in like Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Southeast Asia, especially with India really making quite a progress there. But 3 out of 4 people in sub-Saharan Africa, they're still living in the dark with no access to electricity. And these places, as a keynote speech just was highlighting, that the 90% actually lives in remote, the areas that are hard to reach areas in sub-Saharan Africa. And to bridge the gap and to really achieve at least a net zero, we need to improve and to give access to electricity for these people. Next slide, please. Yeah, so for us, Africa Green Tech, that's what we have been doing the past years. Of course, we started off with providing electricity to the people in what we call as a solar container, but speaking with people on the ground and also in the community and also our local employees, we noticed that electricity is, of course, is the backbone for development, but there are also other basic needs that need solutions, such as access to water, they need cooling, and also internet. Next slide, please. And for this, as we know, the central grid is really hard to reach this area. And on the other side, the solar home systems, or let's say pico products, they don't give this high input as to enable socio-economic development in rural areas. So mini grid really makes sense, and that's what Africa Green Tech has been doing in all these locations that are more than 20. Next slide, please. Yeah, so for us, we do this through an impact site, and this is a term that we coined for every area that we go into, as we, like at the center of the village, there is this solar container with 50 kilowatt peak to really also really touch and to give access to SMEs, as we need development. We really need to give this high output, especially to, I don't know, people to start their businesses like restaurants, salons, welding, all this. And we have many testimonies from people on ground that we have really seen how electricity really brings development to an area that didn't have it. And from the solar turbine, of course, we have water system that purify water to give people in the village, and we have the cooling system, which is also a 10-foot working in where the farmers can store their post-harvest. And we have the smart grids. Of course, we have to set up the grids, and we have one of our sister company, which is called the Solar Bakery, whereas it started off in Congo, and per day they make more than 5,000 bread. As women, they come with the baskets and they go in the village to sell this. But in general, we really see that we enable development in the community, and by giving access, especially in the container, because it's very hard to reach this area. The infrastructure, the roads are terrible, and to put them just everything in a container to set it up. And also it's easier to really train people, because for us, we need to train people on the ground as the maintenance. We need the system to be working. And for Africa Green Tech, we are involved in the phase from development till operation and maintenance. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just our container, how it looks like. As I said, it's a 50 kilowatt peak. We also enable the evening use, as we use the lithium energy storage, and it's quite really mobile. And of course, speaking of areas that we also work there, of course, the political situation is not good, so it's easy to set it up, as it's set up by, like within 24 hours. So if anything comes, or we can just dismantle it within 12 hours and then move it somewhere else, or if the grid also arrives to that place, so it's very easy for us to move it to another place. And of course, with one solar turbine, we can electrify maximum 400 households, 40 SMEs, as those are like our main revenue customers, communities. Of course, the water system is there, the satellite communication system to also give access to internet, of course, with the permits when it's allowed. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is our new scalable solution. Is still the container, but we have seen that in areas that we go to, sometimes the system goes or requires like maybe up to 70 kilowatt peak or 90 kilowatt peak. So this is very scalable from 30 to 90, and it's one of the products now that we are implementing. It's very similar to the Amali one that we have on the ground, but this one is just very to extend and to give more communities and households electricity. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we do impact side, but we also have sometimes the commercial industrial buildings that also requires electricity. And at the moment, we are working with hospitals, the factories, some organizations where we electrify them. And I think the highest that we are in the development is up to like 5 megawatts. So we really scale it between 50 kilowatt peak to even 5 megawatts. And yeah, so there are a number of them that we are currently working with. Next slide, please. Yeah, so for Africa Green Tech, it has been a long journey, and we are now in more than 20 impact sites in many countries. And so far, we have given access to more than 60,000 people. We have avoided, of course, the CO2. That means by taking away the diesel gensets or by avoiding one to be put in place. But as I said, our main customers is we want to enable the social economy and development is really to focus on the small businesses to empower them. And those are our two founders, of course, Thorsten and Ida. Next slide, please. Yeah, so 2030 is a long way, and to really bridge this gap and to decrease down, we really need mini grids to take part as to electrify these 500 million people. And it's a sub-Saharan in general, or at least the off-grid market is quite really profitable, as this was the study that was done by the World Bank, but that between 2022 to 2030, there's an annual profit at least for 3.3 billion. So for investors and developers that are still thinking to get into this market, I mean, this is an opportunity for you. You can look into the study that was made. And of course, for us, Africa Green Tech, we want to be in this market and to at least electrify some of these people at least. Next. Oh, the back. Yeah, so these are just the areas where we are now developing. Really many, as I said, we are now currently developing also in Southern Africa, but our areas mostly is in West Africa and East Africa, with Madagascar, where we are really kicking off and have many projects going on. And next slide, please, before the back kills me. Yeah, so with our holistic approach, we address 14 of the 17 SDGs, and then we do this directly or indirectly on a long-term process. And we actually work with the University of TUM. We have other partners where we want to measure our impact on the ground, and also just to make sure that we know what we are heading to. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm just in time to park. Yeah, that's it from my side. I'm looking forward to your questions, and please take my email if you want us to collaborate. We're always open to work with many partners in Africa and also here in Germany. Thank you. We can't hear you because you're speaking.
Am I audible now? Is it working?
Yes, yes.
I don't know why it's happening today, but anyways, the best thing ever, always rest until the end. Okay, so thanks a lot, Lucia, for your insightful intervention. Very happy to learn more about your impact sites, which is pretty, I think, pretty much need of the hour to serve the local community where they need the most, where the infrastructure is not there. So very happy to learn about that. Dear audience, please keep your questions packed and ready with by using the question function, and we will go to the Q&A round afterwards, where I can take your questions to the presenters. So without further ado, I have the pleasure to invite Ms. Imane Ben Amar, Business Development for East Africa, and now the Sales Director of for Turbulent Hydro. She got promoted to, I think, yesterday, so congratulations, and the floor is all yours. Please stick to 10 minutes because I will pop up again.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Deepak. Thanks indeed. So yeah, my name is Imane Ben Amar, and I am the Turbulent Sales Director. So Turbulent is a Belgian company which was created in 2015, but with a global footprint, projects in basically as good as almost every continent in the world. We offer decentralized hydropower, and our solution is inspired by nature, which you will understand in a minute. Please go to the next slide. Yes. So with our technology, we're basically or specifically targeting the communities that are or underserved. Ms. Heun and Ms. Kamati have both shared very accurate numbers on about how many people are still living in the dark or not electrified or do not have access to electricity. So that's why we try to basically bring a solution to these people that suffer because of centralized solutions. We target locations with low head that are nearby these communities and these consumers. When I say low head, we can place our turbines, our gravitational turbines, in a drop that goes from 1.5 to 4 meters already. So again, locations that we very often find nearby villages, communities, and local businesses. With a single turbine, we can electrify from 130 up to 600 households. And that's how we basically bring affordable and clean energy to these communities. And with our technology, we're very proud to also say that we target not only SDG 7, but that we target 5 out of the 17 SDGs. Next slide, please. Again, our innovation is really focused on the decentralization of hydropower, where traditional hydropower used to serve or is still serving a lot of people today, but is often very centralized, far away from its end consumers, requires years and years and years of implementation and building and concrete works, you name it, causing risks to the people surrounding, causing risks to water biodiversity. We've really tried to step away from that and rethink hydropower, and we've basically create a network of all decentralized smaller installations, so that in the end we can still reach that capacity, but do it in a cleaner and ecological way. Next slide, please. Yes, as you can see here, these are our turbines, which goes from the generator up until ready for shipment. And as you can see, it is a very compact solution, again, referring to traditional hydropower and the dams we know, which is easy to ship, and we can basically deliver our turbines in a matter of months to really create impact. Next slide, please. Okay, I will be zooming in 3 of our projects. One of the projects is actually with another ARE member and one of our dear partners called Hydrobox, who are based in Kenya, with whom we have basically been able to set up an ecosystem which provides 24/7 baseload for all kinds of productive use of energy. It's an ABC system, so with an anchor client being a tea company, some local businesses in agriculture like cooling systems and e-mobility, and then we have the communities like the schools and the hospitals. Deepak, if I may ask you to click on the central image in the middle, which will take us to a video, and then the video you can start it from 5 minutes 14, please. And obviously for everybody else, you can have a look at the full video on our Turbulent Hydro YouTube page. Can we go to, yeah, the sound is not working, I see. Okay. Maybe if you just go to the video, there's subtitles, and I'll just give a small, I'll give a little voiceover. So yeah, I invite everybody to go to our YouTube and have a look at the full video. But the part I wanted to show you is basically one of the employees from Hydrobox, our counterpart, who is basically explaining how the local businesses have evolved through this technology, how there are shops that used to, for example, stay open until 5-6 p.m. that are now have opening hours until 10 p.m. He's also discussing about how local communities or local businesses were really suffering because of the outages of the national network, and on top of that, also referring to how our turbines and the electrification has basically added to street lighting in the county, the Murang'a County, which has also led to less theft and people feeling more safe in the places where they live. I think we can wrap up the video and then we can go to the next. We can go to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. We have a very exciting project. Unfortunately, I cannot yet disclose the location, but I'm hoping that we can very, very soon communicate on this. But this is a project that we target farmers with basically a hybrid solution for irrigation. So we are installing 75 kilowatt hydropower, 200 kilowatt solar, which because this particular client is experiencing extremely unreliable outages from the national grid. They are actually currently going through their biggest energy crisis. They're experiencing production losses that go up to 50%. They are relying on diesel generators, so they have huge bills. There are people that are risking or that were risking basically the stability of their employment and their jobs. And it is also a region where floods have increased because of climate change. So this hybrid solution that we are installing will be an on-off grid system where we can easily switch. So when the grid fails, the pumps will basically rely back on the off-grid system that we are installing. So the impact that we are creating right here is, first of all, we're saving 764 CO2 emissions per year. We're generating 720 megawatt hours per year. When on the grid, we can also, or when not consuming this energy, we are actually injecting it also into the grid, meaning we're adding surplus capacity to the grid, meaning we're helping to stabilize the grid. 450 employees of these farms are affected, and jobs are secured. And there's the beauty of the solution is also that it is always scalable, as we can always add more and more panels when needed. So when the farm is to grow, panels can still be added, and we are basically countering the floods by creating more and more irrigation systems. We use the water to basically counter floods on those farms as well. And then maybe the next slide, please, which is a project that we have in the DRC, which is 30 kilowatts also for irrigation. Our turbine has safe and soundly arrived on its destination, but we are still going through installment and some civil works. The problem statement there was that they already had a corn farm, which was purely rain fed, but they were also the sole producers of wheat in that region, meaning they had to have a very solid and stable supply chain to be able to supply the wheat to their buyers. And they were relying, in order to be able to secure or to ensure the supply chain, they were relying immensely on diesel, which was amounting to 42% kilowatt hours, dollar cents per kilowatt hours. So in order to be able to ensure this supply of wheat, they actually reached out to us to have a 24/7 solid system that can electrify their irrigation systems, which has, through calculations and when designing this project, also resulted in the possibility to basically grow the wheat farm with another K hectares. Another very positive aspect to this project is that instead of the diesel generators, which were a bit dispersed, they now also have our turbine is basically the injection. The distance between injection and consumption is limited to 700 meters, so there's less transportation, and they're also experiencing less energy losses. And we are basically already looking into building another dam and scaling the solution. Unfortunately, I don't have any production numbers yet, as it is still under installment, but we hope to have them in 2024. Next slide, please. So there's a couple of challenges. I think my colleagues in the panel can all relate to these challenges. Some of them have actually also been mentioned by Ms. Heun in the beginning. The first one, always the biggest bottleneck, I would say, is the finances or access to finances. I would say the size of our technology is never the ticket size of big institutions. So we're also always looking into smaller financing institutions or grants, etc. But given the size of our technology, we're often also working with small and medium sized enterprises, and these enterprises often are also being, so to say, judged very happily or very heavily or rated, judged very heavily by these systems. Secondly, we have the technical data, which is in a way also related to skills on site. So with hydrology, we have to have historical data. We need to get accurate data from measuring systems and measuring stations, which is not always the easiest in rural areas. So we're also trying to reach out to governments and policymakers to also insist on having better data collection and data quality. Myself there. Lastly is the policymakers. Again, our size of the technology, the novelty of the technology. We have a very teeny tiny seat at the renewable energy policy or lawmaking regulation table, as we do not fit into the traditional hydro seat. And we are also not solar, so we're somewhere in between, and we really want to tell the regulators, tell the policymakers to please give us also the recognition our technology deserves, so we can basically also counter the places that are not met today with the existing technologies. Next slide, please. So yeah, thank you for listening. Please have a look at our website and our YouTube channel. And if there's anything, you can always reach out to me on the mail address you can see here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman. Am I audible now? Yeah, okay, all right. So thanks a lot for your insightful intervention. Once again, this presentation is a very good exemplification of how we can also look beyond solar and how we can also look to other technologies and see what is there by harnessing the power of water, what more can we achieve, how it can be interlinked with other sectors and subsectors to power productive use applications and so on and so forth. Therefore, I think it was a very impactful presentation. So thank you for that. We will see you again at the question answer round. Moving on to the next slide, we will have Ms. Caroline Plaza representing one of our other DRS members, Becquerel Institute, who is the managing director in France. Caroline, the floor is all yours. Please stick to the time and we will, the floor is all yours. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be there. Thank you for the webinar, and the Becquerel Institute is very happy to be there too. The keynote and all the first presentation was very interesting too, so I'm very happy to share all of this. Next, please. Becquerel Institute is a research center and consultancy company focused on PV, but also on all renewable energy. As the previous speakers say, Ms. Horn and Lucia and Iman, the SDG 7 is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. If we have a look on the indicator published this year by the United Nations in this report, the proportion of population with access to electricity increased from 87% in 2015 to 91% in 2020, but that the world rate, and if we have a look on the different indicators, the regional indicators, it is only 50% for the sub-Saharan Africa region, where as Lucia said, 3 or 4 of the people without access to electricity are located. In the meantime, the share of renewable sources have increased from 16% to 19%. Power capacity have been installed, but in the same time, the demand of energy have increased. So this rate is growing slowly and have to grow more rapidly. Renewable sources power 28% of the electricity production. But when we look at the transport sector or the production of heat, challenge remains. Next slide, please. During this time, lots of changes have occurred for renewables. Like on saying the keynote, the costs have dropped in a huge range. This graph is the graph from the IRENA, is the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity. Of different renewable sources, concentrated solar power, offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar photovoltaic. As you can see, all the costs have dropped and the competitiveness is growing a lot. If we have a special look on the yellow line, what is for solar photovoltaic, in the first point in 2010, new PV plants is more for costs have been calculated for utility scale plants. In 2010, the cost to produce for this plant 1 megawatt was above $400 per megawatt hour. But in 2022, this cost have dropped to $60. And that's a really huge decrease, and these costs are now lower than the fossil fuel cost to produce electricity calculated by the IRENA. So that's be renewable, and PV can really be an accelerator and to achieve the sustainable development goals in an economical way. Next. Its competitiveness, what have grown. can explain, and all the other aspects that have been discussed also in the keynote, that the PV global market is booming, is growing a lot. The first graph you can see in the left is the total installed capacity installed. It's above 1,200 gigawatts. The big contribution since 10 years to this market is the Asian and Pacific region, but follows by Europe and America. Last year, in 2022, 240 gigawatts of PV have been installed, is 37% more than in 2021, and it will be still growing in 2033. This increase is supported by all the segments. The utility scale, all big PV plants are increasing, but half of the installed capacity of last year is with more decentralized PV, like smaller plants on rooftop or smaller application. Next, please. And as we heard in the keynotes, the world was installing 240 gigawatts. The estimation for the annual market in Africa are a little bit different between the sources, but is around 1 gigawatt from IRENA and APSIA, the African Solar Association. And as you say, for other sources, it can be estimated around 2 gigawatts. For example, but that's less than 1% of the total installation in the world. And so the potential for PV in Africa is still huge, and where, as everyone knows, there is a very good solar resources globally. So PV can still be deployed in a large way. Next, please. Yes, let's focus on a scenario that has been calculated by the International Energy. This scenario is a sustainable Africa scenario, is a scenario they calculate to fulfill all the development goals on time in a full in 2030. So in this scenario, they calculate what will be the demands on electricity, and they calculate the capacity and the power and to fulfill these demands. So that's clear that the demands and the electricity demand in Africa will increase by 2030. It is not just in the household gaining access, that's a part of the increasing of the electricity demand, but also for the people who already have access, and they calculate that this demand and that's the electricity consumption for this household will increase too. And another aspect, as we saw in the first slide for the transport sector and for the heating, for example, the electrification of the transport will increase the electricity demand, and the electrification of some production process too, and the production of hydrogen. So all this together will increase, even if some effort have been made in the demand on electricity. The demand on electricity will increase. Next slide, please. So like Ms. On said in the keynote, now 80% of the new power capacity are installed in renewable, including solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal. And so in the scenario in this sustainable Africa scenario, 80% of the new to 2030, 80% of the new capacity will be from renewable. if you have a special look on the green line, it's the solar PV, what will be needed to be installed to fulfill the electrical demand. That represents 120 gigawatts. So for now, I think the total installed capacity in Africa is around 12 gigawatts. So it's 10 times the actual capacity and 100 times the annual PV installed last year. So to conclude, I think PV and other renewable have a really big role to play in achieving the SDG goals. Thank you. Next and final one. Thank you. Feel free to contact us, and happy to have questions after. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline, for presenting us with the latest trends and the latest information on the status of the renewables, especially the PV and the forecasts and so on. Okay, without further ado, I would like to invite the next speaker in line. Next slide, please. Mr. Christian Schattenmann, the head of Energy Access, Bamboo Capital Partners. Christian, I may have to ask you to a little bit tighten up your presentation so that we can liberate some time for question answer. The floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to shorten it. Thanks a lot, Deepak. Thanks to the ARE team and to GIZ for supporting this webinar and for inviting me. Maybe quickly, next slide, please. A few words about Bamboo. So we're around since 16 years. We're trying to innovate to bring financing to impactful and scalable businesses in frontier markets. We started investing in energy access in 2009, so quite some time ago. Have been early investors in companies like Greenlight Planet, now Sun King, Husk Power Systems, Bbox, or Orb Energy. And we tested and invested in the whole range of different business models, from pay-as-you-go solar to distributors of large AC systems to C&I, from mini grids to mesh grids, and we also invested in clean cooking. So initially we were only investing equity, but later we added debt and more recently also grants. We manage 5 energy access funds with different strategies, from private equity to sector development funds for a specific country, where we also design and implement RBF and catalytic grant programs. When making equity investments, we typically also take a board seat and have good insights into the companies and the market. And somehow we were able to observe a bit from the inside how the energy access space has evolved over the past years. Next slide, please. And I want to start with a slide that is maybe a bit repetitive, and Caroline, Babel and others have already talked about that, but I think it's very important from an investor point of view and with regards to the different business models that we look again at how the technology and the economics have changed. 15 years ago, appliances were inefficient, consuming a lot of electricity. Today, a customer wants lighting. A small TV and a fan may only need 5 kilowatt hours per month, thanks to LED lighting, efficient DC appliances, etc. Batteries were very expensive. Today, there are still large cost factor, but the costs have come down significantly. Solar PV, as Caroline said, has dropped massively in prices, while poles and wires, transmission lines, haven't become cheaper. This means that suddenly 100% renewable is becoming economic in some contexts, and they allow full decentralization. Another important point is that 15 years ago we saw feature phones spreading into every village in Africa, but M-Pesa was still at its beginning in Kenya. Now smartphones are spreading and mobile money is widespread probably across all of Africa now. Data costs have come down, and we see a data revolution happening in rural Africa now. So what does this mean for energy access? Well, we don't need centralized generation and AC transmission at all costs. We can go smart, flexible, move generation closer to the consumption, and we can efficiently remote manage systems. This shift in technology and economics has spurred a lot of innovation in the sector, and it's bringing down the cost of electricity, as Beryl mentioned at the beginning. for rural customers, and that's really needed if we want to bring reach universal energy access. Next, please. But there's always a problem, right? This problem is called poverty or low consumption. Here I'm really looking at rural customers. Rural customers in Africa still consume very little electricity, even when they're connected to some sort of a grid. About 70% of customers use less than 4 to 5 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. So how can companies make money, and how can they cover the high cost of serving those customers? That's really the billion-dollar question we need to answer if we want to get to universal energy access. Unfortunately, cross-subsidization is difficult because larger customers today have other options and are not willing to overpay for their consumption. And a single anchor client model, for example, with telcos that would cross-subsidize nearby rural customers hasn't really worked, and we haven't really seen that scale. So let's have a look at how that issue translates into the reality of the different business models. Next, please. So I want to start with mini grids, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that there's a strong business case for isolated grids of a certain size, and it brings meaningful economic activity and job creation. It has really a lot of advantages. I mean, mini grids as per se have lots of advantages. It's real electricity. It allows for productive use. That's what we want. And there is some cross-subsidization possible from larger customers to small households, as we have seen with, for example, Lucia was talking about the several anchor customers or larger customers that basically make up for a large portion of their revenue. But when we look at smaller rural mini grids with a couple of hundred customers, there are few important challenges. Most mini grids require concession agreements with local or regional governments. That takes a lot of time to get done. It's very costly for developers, and it really doesn't help bringing electricity to people who need it. We have also seen a lot of models of mini grids with very optimistic forecasts, and I understand that it's very difficult to estimate demand. But one thing is clear: it takes time until rural customers increase their electricity consumption, and introducing productive uses is absolutely important. But it's a lengthy process, and it often requires some grant support. So today, many rural mini grids are not commercially viable, and they require heavy grant support, and it is unlikely that they will scale. And you see it, the numbers in sub-Saharan Africa confirm it. Mini grids haven't really shown the traction and scale that we were hoping that they will be able to show. So next slide, please. Let's go and move to the small solar products, the DC products, Pico Solar, pay-as-you-go. That's something that has attracted a lot of investment, and some companies have been able to scale to the tens of millions of customers, like Sun King and D-Light. By the way, we were an early investor in Sun King and made a very successful exit with a 6 times money multiple, or more than 6 times money multiple, which is great for the sector. We were not the only ones. But I think it's important that we need to communicate that, because there were a lot of investors who got hurt in the sector by down rounds, restructurings, etc. But let's see it. What's the problem? So there are winners, but there are lots of other companies who are struggling with one basic problem, which is affordability. Rural customers just don't have money they can spend on energy, or very little money. That means they need to provide financing to customers to overcome the upfront cost of solar. And it also means that they need to embark in a complex business model where they need to be many things at once. And they need to be able to manage the last mile distribution. They need to be sometimes product designers because they are vertically integrated, and they need to be consumer-facing financing company. And that means that they need to raise a lot of capital. They need to take FX risks, and this financing is inflating their balance sheets, and that's completely unsustainable and will not lead to scalability. We have seen recently off-balance sheet vehicles of larger companies, but it's difficult for smaller distributors to get this done. And also linked to the affordability issue is that lots of customers are only paying as they go and when they can, when they don't have other pressing needs. And we see very low collection rates of companies. And if you add a little bit of the high overheads issue to it, because lots of companies employ expensive expats or invest in massive scale that doesn't come, then you have a real profitability challenge. So in summary, there are opportunities, definitely, but there are a lot of companies that are struggling. Next, please. So now that's an interesting one. Talking about CNI, large AC products, mesh grids, means that we're looking at a part of the sector that is very quickly evolving because of innovation and technology innovation. So there's clearly a market for CNI, and we have seen that since quite some time. There's an increasing market for AC systems that are able to, where companies are able to provide financing. So the financing needs to be tackled. So the good thing is all this doesn't require concessions, and it creates jobs, helps power productive use. So it's a real opportunity and a strong investor case. But many of those models still need some grants if you want to reach to more rural small businesses, difficult to reach clients. Mesh grids are another technology which is super promising. We don't have time now talking about this, but moving the production closer to the customer and connecting only people or households or consumers who need to be connected to be more cost efficient, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm always saying, comparing that to if you want to build a road between two villages in rural Africa, you don't start with a highway, right? Especially if people don't have cars, you start with a small road and then you add lanes whenever you need them. So you have to reduce your initial capex to the required minimum. And mesh grids are one option to do this, and they require typically less grants than traditional AC mini grids. Next, please. So what are the delivery models and what are their advantages, disadvantages? I have already talked about that. We have tried to quantify a bit the cost per connection and what grant levels are required. These are really rough estimates, and they vary very much between different projects and different countries. But I mean, I think in the middle of this table you have the real commercial opportunity, and at the upper end and the lower end, the lower you go to low-income people, the more difficult it becomes from a commercial point of view, and the less interesting it becomes from an investor point of view. Next slide, my last slide. So what does it mean for us? So there's a lot of innovation, that's great, new options, but we need to focus on the customer, on the consumer. What energy level does the consumer need, and how can this energy be supplied in the most cost-effective way? And I think there's lots of different options. The mix will be different for each country, for each project, but there's one thing that is obviously clear from an investor perspective: long-term commercial viability is a must. And if we need grants, they should be readily available. Their amounts and payment time should be clear to the company and to the project, because otherwise it's impossible to set up the financing. And I think that the grants should really focus on the capex part of it, and companies should be able to be OPEX break even without further grant funding. I stop here now. I hope it was not too long.
Thank you so much, Christian. Well, it's okay. It's just that we have about 2-3 minutes per question answer, but nevertheless, dear audience, we have collected all your questions. We will be sending them to all the speakers, and they will get back to you bilaterally by emails. Now, may I ask all the speakers to come up on the stage by turning your camera and audio on. I have one question, one very interesting question that came up, which I will ask to all of you. And being mindful of the time, I would request you to give a short and crisp answer to that. This question is super interesting, and I think it suits to all of you. So the question goes like, we talk about leaving no one behind and affordable energy access. But when it comes down to whether or not off-grid rural communities can actually afford the electricity, we sometimes gloss over the extreme poor who remain behind when even if the project is pro-poor. Now, what exactly for you in your perspective is the meaning of affordable energy access, and how are you planning to get this done, or in your perspective, how it should be done? Are these projects must be paid by the donor organizations or the country level ministries, or others who, in your opinion, are the right ones to pay for the energy access to make it affordable for the poor? I will start with the order of Mrs. Hun. Please, quick and crisp answer, please, Mrs. Hun.
Yes, it's the main question we have to solve. And so as we heard from Christian Schattermann, there are different solutions because we have different customers. Leave no one behind means that we have to look for a solution for small consumers. They have only 4 kilowatt hours per day or something like that. So maybe we have very pico solar systems or small solar systems. And on the other hand, at the end, we have, for example, a mini grid and productive use from some consumers. So we have a variety, and we have to look for different solutions. And that's what we are doing. For example, one of the ideas is a result-based financing system or a support of solar home systems. So we are supporting different sorts of solutions from the ministry.
Thank you. Lucia?
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very important question. I think to be answered, it has to be quite broken into a number of challenges that needs to be solved. And so first of all, I think when we are looking into mini grids, and also my fellow panelists, I think they went into this, it's really, there are many challenges when it comes to implementing the decentralized solutions. And for mini grids, from our perspective, usually is the grid. When we go into these communities, first of all, sometimes there's no grid. That means we have to speak to the government to build this grid, and sometimes they don't have the funding to do so. So we really need collaboration, and also for all the parties that are involved in the market to work together. So for funders, of course, to come in, and for institutions like PWCET also to support the government so that they can implement the grids. And then on the other side, of course, there is the issue of affordability. And I think when it comes to what does it mean, of course, being able to afford to pay electricity, but I think as many people, especially in these areas, they live under $1 USD per day. That's really very challenging to be able to afford the solutions. But yeah, at the end of the day, we also need to maintain the system so that they can really work in the longer run. I think yeah, from my side, it's a topic I can go on and on. I think I only have a few seconds, but yeah, I can give it to my other panelists to add to that.
Thank you, Lucia. Imen?
Thanks, Lucia. As the two panelists already said, obviously there's different solutions, different ways of dealing with it. I'll give a solution specifically for our technology, maybe to change it up a bit. What we have seen in the continent is that solar is often subsidized from the government. So often it is slightly more accessible or more affordable. But unfortunately, up until today, we have never found ourselves in a situation where our our energy generated through our hydropower turbines would be subsidized. So really, it's putting us really outside of the game, so to say, compared to solar. So maybe a call to, again, regulators, but also Also looking at the finances, the financiers, yes, we have very low consumption today, but I would also like to call on them to have more trust in when we give more capacity, then generation will also grow. So maybe look at loans maybe over a longer term or projects over a longer term. That's my twofold response.
Thank you. Caroline?
Yes, I agree with the previous speaker. The solution is just one way, but maybe to have all the way together and to have different technology and different solution, but also different business model. The slide was very interesting, and that's some business model that's already doesn't need grants. So maybe if this part is growing with the competitiveness of the energy, if this part is growing, so there is less part of the market who will need subsidies, and maybe in this way the way to support it have to be diversified too, because with this diversity maybe we will comply to didn't let anyone behind.
Thank you. Christian?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. There's no way that we can electrify everybody without grants, and it hasn't happened in developed countries either, right? So you need that grant support. The question is, how can you keep the grant as low as possible? Because grants are not, there's no infinite availability of grants. So that gets me back to what I said in the last slide. We need to be less technology dogmatic. We need to be customer centric, and we need to be completely agnostic with regards to what type of technology, what type of business model. And that's an educational exercise that has to be done with governments and with the DFIs, because that's the only way how we can bring down the cost. And there is innovation, and the private sector is able to implement it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The audience, extremely sorry that we couldn't take more questions, but as promised, I'm going to share all your questions with all the speakers and with your contact email so that they can respond to you bilaterally. With this, from my side, I would like to wholeheartedly thank all of you, all the speakers, the fellow organizers, as well as my team, to have this opportunity to organize this series of PWCET. And it has been a very great journey for myself as a personal experience and also my professional experience. And I would look forward to similar such activities in the near future. Thanks once again, and I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Dorothea Tremba, for the closing remarks. Dear audience, please stick with us for a couple of more minutes beyond time for this closing remarks, and it will be appreciated. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deepak Mohapatra, and thank you for your excellent moderation. Well, that was great and very interesting to listen to all of you. I can really feel the energy and the commitment from all of you, even if we are hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away from each other. Time is running and so many aspects to look at. Now we are not only coming to the end of this event, but also the end of this webinar series. The aim of the event series was to cover the broadest possibility range of topics related to off-grid energy access with decentralized renewable energy solution in the context of energy transition. Mrs. Höhn's inspiring keynote, Deepak's presentation, including the wrap-up of the past webinars, and your contribution, distinguished speakers, have shown that we have addressed a whole range of important topics in the various webinars that are closely related to decentralized renewable energies, which have an impact on progress, in addition to the technical aspects, which are also very important. And the most important part are the people, which focus on communities and local citizens, and their role in decentralized renewable energy. So an integrated approach is needed. On behalf of GBE and ARE, but also personally, I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists of all webinars for sharing your knowledge and experiences and for giving us these insights. The exchanges were indeed very interesting and fruitful, and were the discussions, which were also very open due to different professional and regional backgrounds from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, and with the emphasis on hearing from the different perspectives and to change of ideas. And especially thanks to Ms. Bärbel-Höhn. In more than half of the webinars of this series, you have repeatedly set important points of attention with your inspiring keynotes, and you supported you also supported the webinar as it all. Distinguished audience, if you unfortunately missed the webinar on this series, don't worry. The summary, the PowerPoints, and the recording are posted on our websites. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. In this regard, I would also like to thank the REE team, especially Deepak Mohapatra, Jens Jäger, Lingu, and David Lecoq, for the pleasant and successful cooperation during the last years. It was really a pleasure for me working with all of you. And events, of course, live from the participants. Therefore, a very warm and sincere thank you to all of you, the numerous participants who join us from the various countries despite different time zones, as you could see in Deepak's presentation. Your great participation has not only shown how important decentralized renewable energy is, and that the circle of people interested in this field is growing, but also that the professional backgrounds and living contexts are very different for all of us. Your questions have inspired us further, and your commitment motivated us. So, however, there is, of course, much more to say and to discuss and, on each and every topic that has been raised within the webinar series and beyond. Therefore, stay or get connected. Use your networks, which is constantly growing, and continue the discussion in an open-minded, motivated, and energetic way. Thank you again to all of you for your contribution, for your attention and your support. So have a nice rest of the day. We look forward to seeing you somehow, somewhere, or on the other events, conferences, or meetings, or so on. So have a nice day. Bye-bye.